Adjustment layers aren't the only things we use layer masks on. You can use it on pretty much any layer there is. So here I have this image, and the other one we're going to use is a picture of a bass guitar, and I'm going to show you how to combine those two images with a fade so that it fades from one into the other. So let's first move the bass guitar over to the other file. Now so far we've selected everything, copied, and then moved over to the other file and pasted. There's actually a faster way. If you grab your move tool, you can click out here somewhere in the canvas and simply drag up to the tab of whichever file you want to move that to and let go. If there is a message like this that pops up, you can just say OK, and there is the guitar. Now this guitar is quite large and I can't really see how it's fitting in there, but I know I want it to fit next to the guy's face. So when you're putting two images together, whether it be with a layer mask or some other technique, it's usually a good idea to take the top layer and reduce the opacity so that you can see where the bottom layer is. So I'm going to place this, and because it's so huge, I'm going to zoom back a little bit and hit Command T and size it down just a little closer to the size of this other image so that there's more of the guitar showing. Alright, I like that. So I have this picture kind of halfway overlapping this guy over here. And we can turn the opacity back up to 100% on that layer. And here's where we can add the layer mask. So unlike the adjustment layers that already come with one, we have to add one to this. If there is nothing selected and you click on the layer mask button down at the bottom of the layers panel, it looks like a rectangle with a circle in it. You'll add a layer mask, and it's just exactly the same as the one that we were just working with. So if I want this to gradually fade into this guy, then I could just grab my color black by hitting D and then X to put it in front. Getting my paintbrush tool, hit B, and big fuzzy brush, opacity up high, and then I could paint it in. That's one way to do it. Did you know you can actually use any of your tools? I know I already said selection tools, but we could also use a gradient tool to create a really smooth fade from one end to the other. So I'm going to grab my gradient tool, which is underneath my bucket tool, and then make sure that it's the black and white one, which if you have black and white as your colors, that's what it should be. And opacity is set to 100%. And make sure always when you're trying to edit a layer mask that you are actually on that part of the layer, because there are two parts of this one layer. There is the color thumbnail, and if I click on that, my little white brackets move over it. And I apologize that I actually can't zoom in on this. The program that I use to record these tutorials doesn't allow it for some reason, or I would show you. But if you click back on the white layer, those brackets move over. When you're on that white layer, you're on the editing layer mask. Okay, enough said. Let's grab our gradient tool and create a gradient. So instead of applying black and white to the picture, it's put that black and white over here on my photo. Because I've got 100% opacity in, I could actually just kind of keep retrying this until I liked the way it looked. Now I like the way this is looking down here, but I don't really like how this is coming into his eyeball and this is showing up in his hair. So I'm going to switch to my paintbrush tool by hitting B and make sure I've got black, and I'm just going to paint into the mask where I don't want that stuff to show. Okay. Now you might be thinking, why not just use an eraser? Isn't that the same thing? Well, I could have used an eraser and had visually this exact same effect if I had used a big fuzzy brush to erase it. But with an eraser, then you've erased those pixels. They are permanently gone. You can't do anything more with them. With this type of layer masking, that whole picture is still there. In fact, you can hide your layer mask by holding down Shift and clicking on the thumbnail, and it will just cancel out that layer mask for the time being, and then Shift and clicking on it again will reveal it. you'll notice there is a little link between these two parts of that layer, those two little thumbnails. That is so if you grab your move tool and move it, the layer mask moves with the layer itself. But here's another advantage to layer masks that's much better than the eraser approach. If you click that link, it disappears, and now if I click on the color part of my layer, so I've clicked on the color thumbnail, I can move that picture and adjust where that guitar is without having to redo that whole fade line, and it looks a whole lot better. Once you've done repositioning this part of the layer, I would highly recommend clicking on that link to relink those, just so as you go on with your project, you won't accidentally move just the layer and leave the layer mask behind.